So my name's James Hughes. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I live in Aotearoa in the Whare catchment, and yeah, great bunch of people, and thanks for having me. So this is a study we did for the Regional Council last year on looking at emissions for the Auckland Region, and I'll just run the results of the study through with you and point out the main findings. And we looked at some opportunities to reduce emissions as well. Can anyone see behind me? Right, go to the next one. So just as a way of background, across the world and across different cities, all these cities are preparing their own strategies for reducing emissions. Vancouver is a highlight, there's Sydney, London, Wellington, that's Norway, and Bristol, and of course Auckland, the Auckland Carbon Futures project happened last year. You can see New Zealand average per capita emissions here, Auckland slightly higher in the middle of the range, Australia and the US way up here at about 25 tonnes, Vancouver's a leading light, and the Oslo, Stockholm there down the bottom, so we're not doing too well. Some New Zealand examples, we've got, just click through Wellington City, Auckland and Waitakere. Wellington has an aspirational vision for carbon neutrality. Auckland Region has no fixed target for its emissions reduction, so that's an important thing I think needs to be considered for the new council. Waitakere City had a provisional target of about 40%. The Carbon Futures project was part of the ARC-led Climate Change Working Group. The objective was to develop a suite of reduction initiatives for the Auckland Region. We looked at high-level data from the Communities for Climate Protection program. We developed a range of reduction options, and then we're going to update those. They're updating the profile at the moment. That's the data sources that we used. Some technical points there. We looked at the CCP data that some of you might be aware of. Statistics New Zealand, the energy data file, and NIWA gave us some data on the agricultural emissions for Auckland. So we've compiled all of that, and this is what we got. 12 million tonnes. This is 2006 data. A big chunk of it's transportation, as you can see. Agriculture is a small percent, and residential industrial, you can see the other ones in there, but 12 million tonnes in 2006, transportation for the major components. And we felt that was a reasonable approximation, and again, we're emphasising that was a very rough estimate, and the Council is currently revising that estimate on a complete bottom-up emissions inventory that they're undertaking at the moment. Forest sinks were excluded, that's a major point there. Okay, we projected those out to 2040 based on a range of assumptions, so we went from 12 million in 2006, we backcast it to 1990 and forecasted out to 2040. So the deficit at 2040 to 1990 levels was 11 million tonnes. So you can see there at 2040 we're 11 million tonnes above the 1990 levels, which some of you may be aware of the Kyoto Protocol. That's a benchmark there. So there's a few facts down the bottom there. Auckland makes up 15% of New Zealand's total emissions. So then we looked at how to reduce those emissions, and we had a complete. We had a large group of workshops, and stakeholders were involved from the council, and we developed a range of initiatives. It was about 130 that we whittled down to about 30 in a shortlist, and we evaluated them across a range of criteria. You can see here. Ease of implementation, socio-economic fairness, environmental impacts, community and cultural impacts, economic impacts to households, affordability, and the scale of the reduction. Those were developed collectively, and each option of the 30 was evaluated and ranked. And we looked at how much reduction from that peak 2040 we could bring down. So the top 10 initiatives for reducing emissions for the Auckland region were these ones. And they're, again, evaluated across a range of those criteria. Energy efficiency audits, residential awareness, you can read them. So I guess public transport was a key one. Retrofits in buildings and households, focus on transit-oriented development, electric vehicles was in there, and carbon sink. So those were the top 10. The next 10, similarly, public transport pricing reform. These are some key ones in here. Road user charging and congestion charging were seen to be key initiatives. Improved car parking policy, organic waste management was in there. Green procurement, cleaner fuel for buses, a carbon pollution tax was in there. And the final tier, some heavy freight logistics work again in the transportation sector, biogas and green waste, work travel planning, cycling, walking, school travel plans. Some larger energy ones here, medium scale wind, solar PV and larger scale solar PV. So we put all those together.
When you put them in different tiers,
yep.
Is this in terms of priority or in terms of timing?
That was how they were ranked. That was how they were ranked according to those criteria that were established. So they came out on top, not necessarily across any one criteria, but they had a multi-criteria analysis, and those are the ones that were preferred. And so if we compare, that's our forecast out to 2040, and if we split them by sector, those are the reductions we can get. The transportation sector there is a large chunk. If you go to the next slide, those are the tiers. So if we did the top 10, you can get almost 60% of the total reductions that we calculated by doing the top 10, and the next green and the blue chunks are the remainder, about 40%. So those were one of the recommendations that were made. If we concentrated on the top 10 initiatives, that would give us, the 60% reductions. So in summary, the majority of the reductions are from the transportation sector. Again, the electric vehicles one had a range of assumptions associated with it, but that was a large portion. The top 10 constitutes 60%. With all options in place, 2040 emissions would be 14% below 2006 levels. Well, still, even with all the options, we're still above 1990, so we weren't even getting down to 1990 with all the options in place. And another point, a number of the options would not necessarily operate in conjunction. You might not have road user charging and congestion charging at the same time, so there may be an element of double counting in there. And the conclusions that we reached, this very high level assessment should be used to inform future discussions about how we're going to reduce emissions for the Auckland region, and I understand that some work's been undertaken. There is no target, and that was one of the key kind of gaps, is how can you plan for something like that without actually having any idea of where you want to go. So it was something that was going to be informed by this study, that what's a suitable target that might be set for the region. And of course, more financial or more detailed analysis might be needed to try and understand how those options might work in practice, how much they would cost, who would fund them. The main point with this is that these were options that were considered applicable by the council, the ones that the council could either influence or be involved with directly. And those are the main points. Thank you very much. There's a little quote there to